Microsoft said that almost 70% of employees right now feel more anxious about the future of their roles and the role of AI in that. So 70% of people are having mini freakouts right now. And only about 1 in 3 leaders actually feel prepared to guide their teams through this. There's a lot of unanswered questions today. So, next up, I'd like to welcome Meghan Lockwood Rexer, who is the co founder and head of go to market and partnerships at CoreX. Meghan has been leading strategy and marketing at Workday's newest partner, SkillCentrics, and driving strategy for NTT Data's digital transformation suite. But what I think is most relevant to today's conversation is that she sent me over a couple of her team's accolades, and she has worked on some amazing teams. She's had placements on Inc. 5000's top list 3 consecutive years in a row, Boston Globe's #1 place to work, Inc. magazine's top 375 US workplaces, SPI's best of the best consulting firms, and many more. So, Meghan, you have something figured out, and I am just so excited for you to share some of that wisdom with us today. So, thanks for being here. I'll go ahead and pass it over to you.
Thanks, everyone. Can you hear me? And I'm thrilled to be here. It's great to see everyone's faces too. Let me get my screen on. It's so fun to see some of these chats too, because it's seeing good friends too, even in the audience. So everyone can see my screen. Everything's good. I see nodding. So, um, yeah, I think that there is very little pattern recognition right now and today about anything going on. And so, as I was, how we see around corners, there are no corners that I don't think any of us have seen before. So, I was thinking about preparing for this, and it occurred to me that Tale of Two Cities. And even then, Mark's chart early on about the uncertainty index. And I think that for all of us, leaders, teams, all of that, this is probably the most unprecedented of unprecedented times. And I feel like ever since 2020, ever since the pandemic, we keep saying that and it keeps sort of accelerating. But I do think as we talk about how do we lead, how do we build cultures together, how do we coalesce and sort of try and make sense of the chaos around us, that it's important to understand that, and I know this is esoteric, so we only have 20 minutes. I won't go too deep into sort of like societal change or that side, but I think it's really important for us to understand that it's not just us, but it's our teams. And almost everything that they understand, almost everything about their pattern recognition is shifting underneath them. And shifting underneath all of us. And so we're seeing, this inflection point of absolutely traditional consulting. I thought, Andy, what you were saying about, you have to disrupt yourself. How we do business 5 years from now, 3 years from now, I don't think that we know. So traditional models are absolutely shifting. And to me, it comes in 3 parts. So it's the technology, right? We've been ringing that transformation isn't new. We've been ringing this digital transformation bell for more than 20 years now. But I do really think that data modeling, agentic AI, all of those things, it's shifting the curve in a way that we probably haven't seen before. I remember 3 or 4 years, 2 or 3 years ago now, a really good friend of mine who's also a great CEO and leader, worked at Forrester, all that, came in after a weekend as ChatGPT sort of did their public launch and said, this is going to be different than, and as big as the change in Google and all of those. And I think we are starting to see some of that pull through. We are starting to see budget line items in customers. We haven't at all seen the maximum of that. I don't want to date myself, but if anybody else has some leftover like microsheet sheets in their sort of, bookshelves somewhere, everything that we're going to change, everything that we do about consulting is going to change because of that. So I think it's the innovation curve, but also one of the biggest line items, if we're talking about sort of consulting and transformation, is OCM. And I think almost often the most red line piece too, but that's happening to our customers. It's also happening to our teams. There's also, I think, on the social side, there's a host of pieces. I think Andy was really interesting talking about, we don't want to exclude our juniors. That's incredibly important because as a workforce, the cohort, we're aging out of the workforce. So your critical knowledge workers are looking at retirement right now. And so how do you replace that? And I think, as we said, right, we are people that do business with other people, to transform their businesses. You need to have the humans that understand your business models, that can do what need to happen and help guide that organizational change management, that strategy, that business transformation. I also think even in client sourcing, right? people who are overwhelmed, I come from a background of optimization. People who are overwhelmed, they click emails less. They're less optimistic. People who aren't leaving their house because we have this digital workforce now, they don't go to conferences as much because it's a lot more to get them out of their pajamas than it is to, leave the office when they're used to doing that for coffee or any of those things. So I think that is, that's a really important nuance as you look at how do you shift your culture. I also think, individuals that graduated during the pandemic are starting to come into budget ownership roles. They're starting to make business decisions, or at least, in the next couple of years, they will. They have not had a lot of small talk in their lives because that's just not a thing that they did. And so I do think as leaders, it's much more important for us to really understand the nuances of the teams below us and what are they facing in order to be able to shift our leadership styles and our behaviors to help them navigate this change and this transformation. And I think the other side is, there's a market transformation. And to me, if you're running businesses, I think every AI, every article that you look at, it's either talking about AI transformation or maybe not today, but, AI transformation or market economics and some of those pieces. And I think all of the confusion and the tariffs and inflation, that has an impact on a couple things. But one of the big things is unless you're bootstrapped, and I think God bless you if you are, you're having to deal with some sort of investor relationship, whether that's venture or private equity or angel. They are getting much more conservative over the past few years. I think their risk tolerance is changing. There's a lot more about what's your EBITDA than your growth trajectories. And so as that market changes, you need a business transformation. You need a different business strategy, and you also need a different cultural code to be able to meet those changes. I think clients are looking for different engagements. As Andy was saying, it's a lot more value-based, even if you're in still time and materials or outcomes based, or sort of, that sort of stage transformation based projects. Clients are looking for much smaller time cycles. They're looking for agility. They're looking for those outcomes, and there's some increased price compression, especially as you start to talk about we're driving efficiency with AI and all of those things. So I think as leaders, if we're being asked to see around corners, there hasn't been a recognition for that. And I think, okay, so why are we talking about culture as we talk about all of the technology transformation? And I think this to me is in the same way that Andy was saying, it's not necessarily hard. I don't think anybody wants a bad culture. I don't think anybody woke up and said, yeah, I don't care about my people or what they think of the organization or that side. What I do think is that there's a question about at what layer is your culture imbued into your strategic decision making? Is it, is it something where somebody wrote a slide once, the head of people or the CEO, wrote a slide, it lives on our website on our careers page, and that's what, and that's as far as it got? Or is it, to me, something that's imbued in everything that you decide, your executive strategy, your bonus structure, your investment in innovation and growth? If there are different ways to do it, and I really believe that the latter, the ability to really drive culture as a strategic advantage, because as AI, as technology becomes a little bit more ubiquitous, as it becomes consulting firms' differentiation used to be your unique IP. Well, if that IP comes down, you either need a better model and disrupt yourself, or you really need the right sort of culture and team, and that's your differentiation. And so to me, this is one of there's a whole bunch of numbers that back this up. I like the HBR article that says that companies that self-report, so in their ESAT, employee satisfaction surveys, report that they have a 70% plus sort of ESAT score, they have 4x more revenue growth year over year than traditional consulting firms. And that's, Forbes says that companies are 23% more profitable. I think there's the Fortune there's a top 100 high growth company, something like that, that they are 100 or 480% higher. They have a 480% growth rate versus like 150 in the S&P 500. So culture is a strategic advantage. It's what helps you get to the next piece. So, I think all of us, yay, we're in, we want a culture. But I think a lot of people don't know how to do that, right? And in the same way that driving innovation isn't complicated. It's not a complicated concept. It's hard to enact in person. I think culture, having a great culture, it's not counterintuitive, but it takes persistence, it takes dedication, it takes intentionality, it takes the how. So I think, we spend a third of our lives at work. And so culture is also the what it feels like to work for your company. And I think, sometimes I used to say it's the story we tell each other about who we are, but it really is a gravitational force of how your team comes together. And I will tell you that a lot of people, somebody recently said to me, I don't want a job, I want a team. And I really do think that that's an important component of it. People like to wear a jersey. They're in the advent of Google and that side, there was an interesting book called Tribes. And that was, we all are still sort of like in this nomadic universe looking for our tribe. So for a lot of people, your company is the jersey you wear. And so what does that feel like? What is that? And I think, you know, it's the same principle really as being a good friend or being a good life partner or that side. But that concept of caring about people, paying attention to and understanding people, knowing who they are, that needs to scale and it requires a whole different kind of pieces. So this is mine. I will tell you, I would love feedback in the quotes and comments, and I'm going to try and keep on time. I've been thinking about in this age of AI, what is a new hierarchy of needs? Everyone's heard of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, where like, you need to have food and shelter and clothing before you can be like self-actualized, or probably in this era, it's, the wellness side. But so what does a team need now in the age of AI to make sure that they are that they are your strategic advantage? And I think to me, first of all, they need to be protected. So fundamental layer as leaders, they need jobs. And so, and they, in that instability, if you see all of the, I won't name names, but a whole bunch of big four consulting firms and major sort of platform players are announcing layoffs, or they're sort of quietly doing it. And so if you're in consulting, that may freak you out a little bit. Um, so they need to be protected. So if you have business models, you need to make sure they're achievable, which is not always hard in bear markets, but align your investment approach for that variance. If you're thinking about acquisitions, I would say be really, really cautious and be really intentional about what those business models are and how do they grow. It also might mean, this might not be the year to hire only full-time employees. What's your 1099 approach? And so make sure that's happening. And again, and align that with your investors and your investment strategy. I'm going to hit time too, so I'm going to go as fast as I can. But also, I think they need to be enabled. So, do they understand the goal? Do they know what hill we're taking? And then to that other side, so enabled is, do we have the transparency to understand who we are and where we're trying to go in our organization? But then also, do you have the right investment in training? Are you giving people time to train? What I think that the hackathon sides and that side, like what are you doing in your organization to align and imbue the ability to disrupt yourself, because you're going to have to in order to protect them and make sure that they have jobs. And then at the highest level, I think is that, you know, are they grown? Are they inspired? Are they empowered? And all of those pieces. So I'll talk about this in the next piece, which is really your assignment. So I think if you have what shifts can you make to really help your teams both adjust and define and live in the volume of technology and social change that they're living in. But then also, how do you grow them? How do you enable them? So I think it is redefining your talent profile. I hire differently today than I did. And I think there's a whole lot of really interesting pieces about skills-based hiring, competency-based hiring instead of proficiency-based hiring. So if you're hiring people who know how to do Cobalt, which is not what you're going to do anymore, but if you're hiring people for a specific code, is that going to exist in 3 years or 5 years, rather than hiring people who understand how to learn new code and how to teach that? I think those are the differentiators there. I like to hire growth mindset thinkers, so people that have this resilience and grit and don't take no for an answer, and also think differently about how to get there. And I actually I like to hire junior talent still today. I think they're super enthusiastic, they're hungry to learn, they're digital native, so they will also be able to absorb the volume of technology change differently than, I think it's really interesting. one of the other sides about your talent profile and your talent pool is how do you, and in that enablement, how do you enable your critical knowledge workers who maybe don't know how to deal with all this change? I have a miraculously great friend who's the head of HR in multiple award-winning culture companies, can't open a Zoom call, not to save her life. And so, like, but she understands culture and team better than anybody I've ever met. So how do we get them help too, like to help them teach the next generation down? I do think it's also reassessing great leadership. So I think it's, that nuance around, great leadership is your manager layer. Are you talking, it's not checking a box, but it's making sure you understand your team, that you have the technology, whether it's, employee satisfaction or like predictive index or enterprise operating system, have a way to reassess what great looks like and layer agility into your planning cycle. So give yourself space to pivot, reevaluate where you are on a really consistent basis and say, like, okay, here's what we thought this 6 months was going to be. Where is the market now? And readjust consistently to make sure that you are enabling and protecting your team for whatever's coming next. And then the last piece I really know is what Mark's going to talk about too is, understand who you are in your market, understand why are you hiring, who you're hiring, and those pieces. And I would also say the final piece is, I think, you know, it can be easy to get enamored with the technology. At the end of the day, people, your talent will follow other people. They will follow your managers. They will follow your vision. They will follow people that fight for them in a really critical way. And I think there's a whole bunch of numbers, but it's really, really expensive to replace talent. So keep the talent you have, keep the people that want to go on this journey with you, and make sure that all of your leadership sort of mechanics are aligned to make sure that that is what you're prioritizing.